Hello everybody, Chris here, and in this video I'm going to be showing you guys how to set up camera limits inside of Godot straight from within the Camera 2D node. So when you're setting up limits, it will give you this yellow border around your scene, and then your camera, which you can see here indicated by this purple line, will not be able to go outside of this line. So even a follow camera following the player, it'll get trapped at each of these limit borders. So to set this up from scratch, let's just jump over to a new scene. So I'm going to right click on this node 2D. This is just a generic scene, so we'll add some stuff to it. So let's add a child node. I'm going to get a camera 2D, create that. And then I'm going to add in my player scene, which I've already created. So for the sake of testing this, I'll assume that you already know how to make a player move around so that your camera can follow it. So make sure that the player is its own thing, not attached to the camera directly. So if you want a camera to follow a player rather than attaching the camera to the player, what you do is you can right click on your player, add a child node, and then we're going to be looking for a transform, it's more specifically a remote transform 2D node. So this will tell the camera to look at the player by having the remote transform under the player. So we create this here, and you'll get this exclamation sign, which tells you that this needs to be talking to a node for this to actually do anything. So on the right in the inspector, we can use the remote path, assign this to the camera 2D, and then in the camera, let's select that and make it current. So now at this point, you'll have the purple box showing the camera and what it will be looking at when our scene launches. And also, it's going to be a follow cam because it's going to be pointing at this remote transform 2D node. So now to actually have something to look at, I'm just going to be dragging and dropping a random background image I grabbed from Pixabay. And we're going to need to find that. So we have this fox. I'm going to pop it in here as our background, I guess. So let's take the fox sprite node, which we just dragged into our scene, and position it under the root. But we need to make sure that it's above the player so that the player renders on top of it. So let's go ahead and test it right now. I'll go ahead and hit play the scene, and we can walk around. But the problem is going to be that there's no limits. So getting to the core of this video, we can see that when we get to the edge of a map, we really want there to be limits there. So let's set those limits up now. In the Camera 2D, there is a tab in the inspector called Limit. When you click on that, it's going to be showing something like -1,000,000, -10 million, and these are measured in pixels. So you're talking about way off the screen, way above here. And what we're going to want to do is to bring that more in line with this background image. Just imagine that this background image was a setup tile map with, all of the objects and everything else that would occupy a town or a cave or whatever. And we need to be able to visually see that as well. So if we take the left and the top and put those at -200, it'll be something more reasonable for us to work with. So -200 to the left and -200 above for the top. And then for the right, we want this to be +200 and bottom +200 as well. Now we can't see anything, and this isn't helping us very much because we have no idea what the limits actually are. So what you do is you go to the editor tab down here and you check draw limits. And apparently you still can't see it, so we need to move the fox actually above the camera. And now we can see the camera gizmos again. So that's going to help us out a lot. We can see the size of our camera. So you can see that even though the limits say we can only go -200, our camera might be wider than that. So the camera might be forced outside the limits because the camera is bigger than your limits. Now let's go to camera 2D again and let's adjust those limits. So now that we can see them visually, we just need to adjust these numbers until they match our map more or less. So we can go to left here and type -600, and that's going to help us out a lot. You can also left click and hold on your -600, and you can just drag this out until we get to the edge of our map. So right about there should be just fine. You could go right up to the pixel edge. What you probably don't want to have happen is any of the background to be within this limits. So just make sure you adjust for that. Let's take the top. I'm going to left click hold on the number, and we're just going to drag this to the negative direction until we're at the top of our limits there. Okay, now with the right, we need to press and hold and then drag to the right because we're increasing the number, and just move it over there. And then lastly, for the bottom, let's increase this. Press hold, drag to the right, and we get our limits to right about there. Okay, so now let's go ahead and hit play on our scene, and let's go up to the top. So our player is walking, and we're going to get to the top of this screen. So our camera can't pierce through it. This is the limit of our camera's visibility. Now, our player can walk up there indefinitely because I haven't set up any collision shapes. But the camera is going to be trapped within these bounds, which is exactly what we're looking for. So if we walked around the entirety of the edge, which might take a while, you would see that we just wouldn't be able to go beyond those limits in any of the directions. Now, if you also want to stop your player from being able to go outside these bounds, you just need some kind of collision shape. So for instance, I can right-click on the camera node. We can add a child object. Let's just add a static body 2D. And then on the static body 2D, I'm going to add a collision shape. So collision shape 2D, and we'll make that shape on the right a rectangle. So we can see our rectangle right there. Let's drag this up here, right outside the bounds, and then stretch this all the way across the length of our map. Okay, and I'll just position it right here. Since there's nothing visible about this shape, as long as it blocks the edges of our map, that will give us the desired result. So I might move this down just a little bit, maybe just right below the limit. And if you wanted to make sure you were blocking all 4 of the edges, you would just do this 4 times. You can duplicate it, just make sure your rectangle shape is made unique for each one. Otherwise, when you stretch the size of your rectangle shape, it'll do it for all of the duplicated nodes as well. So they need to be made unique. Anyway, let's go into play mode and let's just make sure that we can't walk outside of that limit as well. So we're going up to the top of the screen, and once the camera stops, we should be stuck right about here. You can see I can't walk above that. I can walk alongside it, but not above it. So it would be the same if you just put the collision shapes on the left, the bottom, and the right. And that, in a nutshell, is how you use camera limits inside of Godot version 3.3.4. So I've been Chris, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys in some of my future Godot content.